Teams that receive regular feedback and regular coaching are 50% more productive than the ones that are not getting any coaching. That is an unbelievable statistic. 50% more. This chapter on getting your people to step up, I'm going to take you through how we can set our people up to be managers, but also as coaches. Because when we engage and empower our managers, they actually end up engaged in empowering the people that sit underneath them. So imagine if we could get our managers to coach people in their directive role, in addition to the work that you do. You're not paying anything more for it. You're not doing anything differently. What we are doing is enabling our people. So I want to take you through some of the step-by-step, how we would set them up for success, the results that you get, but overall, 50% more productivity. And which business owner and leader would not want 50% more productivity? So the first thing that I want to talk about is that coaching can really help in a number of the other areas. So one of the big things that we want our people to do, we want them to have more motivation and more focus. We want them to basically be more productive. One of the things that when a manager who can be a really good coach, what they can do is really help a person's motivation and focus, because they also know when their work contributes to the business's bigger goals. They want to make sure that they're focused and they've got a shared vision. It also really helps from a conflict resolution. We know that the statistics are that the number one reason people leave their workplace is not because of money. The number one reason is their direct relationship with their manager. So imagine if that conflict could be resolved between the manager and the employee and the person working for them. And this is absolutely if you work as an entrepreneur, as a business leader in a business, or as an entrepreneur, as a business owner in your own business. So it's so important to get our managers who can be able to resolve conflict as it happens. The other thing that happens is that when a manager can actually coach, it actually is part of their leadership development, because one of the things that they start to do is actually look at people's potential, how to get them from, say, a medium level of competence or medium level of performance into a high level. So they also start to understand how they can actually make that happen. In the book, I give a variety of different examples of how to become an effective coach. One of the books that I read that had such a big impact on me, and I would love for you to download it after you've listened, watch this particular YouTube of this podcast, is called The $1 Trillion Coach. Sounds like a crazy title. I know when I saw it, I was a bit like, $1 trillion, that's not a language that we hear normally. We normally talk in the millions or maybe occasionally the billions, but $1 trillion, really? But the book is, it's called The Leadership Playbook for Silicon Valley's Bill Campbell, and it's written by an author and a guy called Eric Schmidt. And there's a couple of other authors as well. When I read this book, I absolutely started to cry. This is such an inspirational book. So one of the things that Bill Campbell did, who the book is premised and based on, is that he actually ended up coaching some of the giants of our world, including Steve Jobs, Apple, and he also coached Eric Schmidt at Google, who was the chairman of Google board of directors. He also coached and was a personal mentor to Jeff Bezos at Amazon, and also Sheryl Sandberg at a time at Google, but later at Facebook. These are big known names. You know, when we're talking about companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google and Apple, they are some of the highest valuation companies of our time. And here is one guy that was a common thread in so many of their different lives. And so when you start to do that, and hence the word $1 trillion. And so when it comes to, for example, small to medium businesses, I've worked with some really amazing clients, like Jane Save from the Save Group. You know, she talks about when it comes to coaching people, how they train them on how to conduct productive and motivating performance, and to make sure that those reviews are actually done. I also work another amazing client called Ali Koshul. She works for Primary Health Network, And she talks about the fact that she always gets her people to identify the strengths in themselves. And then that is a really great way when they identify their strengths and weaknesses for them in order to be able to get coached. Because coaching requires the coachee to be self-aware of their strengths and weaknesses, what they're good at and what they're not. So let's now go into a little bit about some of the actions I speak about, how to actually get your managers to become more of a coach. The first thing is that we actually need to provide them with some coaching. And it is so important. I wrote a book many years ago called Tough Love for Leaders. And because in my experience, I found leaders to be either too tough or too soft. And how do you actually find the balance between the two? And how do you have your communication to be able to do the two? And it's literally a book around coaching. And then we also created a training program for companies to get their people to become trained in terms of actually how to become that. And it's such an important skill. I also dedicate a particular chapter in getting your people to step up. So there are different types of coaching, and let's just talk about some of the different types. Coaching is a very broad word, but specifically when it comes to helping our managers get trained in our business so they can coach our people, that's what we're focusing on. The first is performance-based coaching. So we need our managers to also be able to understand how to give very specific and actionable feedback so that our people know what it is that is happening with their performance, what they've done really well and their strengths, and they continue with that, and what are the areas for improvement. The other one can be coaching around goal setting. And again, we're not talking about life, we're talking about business goals. So for example, an individual in a team has goals to meet for him and her, and then they need to be able to have those alignment with that particular team, with the executive, with the company, with the board's vision, etc. So there needs to be this alignment, almost like this dot point that goes from the ground up all the way through to the top, or from the top all the way down to the bottom, whichever way you want to look at it. We also want to have some of our managers, because some of our people are really looking to develop their career. And so they're in your business because they want to develop their career. And we need to have our managers know how to actually look at what somebody's long-term aspirations are in the business, and how can they actually then help them map out what their performance development might be, what training they might need externally, what other areas of development they might need, and it's mapped out in a performance review or a PDR or a performance development review. It's mapped out what they might need to focus on for the next 12 months. We also want to have our managers that help them with their leadership coaching. So how to communicate better, how to make decisions better, and be able to do that. And these days, the big one that's coming up more and more is that we need our managers to be able to do mental health coaching. Coaching is very different to counselling. Now, if some of your people need some mental health and well-being and they need some support, you might have an employee assistant program or an EAP where you've got external providers providing them that. This is not what we're expecting our managers to do. What we are expecting our managers to do is to be able to ask them the right questions to work out what it is that they might need. What are some of the actions that they might need to take around their work-life balance? And if they need specific mental health, then you would also then link them up into the right path. And what are some of the things that we really need for a good coach? Really good coaches do not need to know the inside out of that person. They don't need to know and have lots and lots of coaching qualifications, although sometimes they can help. What they need to know is to be able to ask great questions. What they need to be able to do is listen when the coachee or the person across them is answering those questions. Managers to be able to provide feedback becomes very, very powerful. And we need our managers who are coaches to really be able to link in and set up very positive relationships with the people in our business. The next thing that I want to talk about, and the next action that you can take as a business leader or owner, is to really look at what are the different hats that a manager wears. We want to be able to wear those different hats, but rather than always be managing, my challenge is I say that we want to always come back to coaching. Because with coaching, if I can use that analogy, we are teaching our people how to fish for themselves. We're not fishing for them. We're asking them the questions. We're developing their brains. We're developing their skills so that they can go and problem solve the areas that they need to problem solve in their specific roles. And let's talk about some of the different roles that a manager needs to play. At times, absolutely, the manager plays the role of a mentor. As a mentor, they're there who've got specific experience in something, and they're sharing their knowledge, they're sharing their experience or their wisdom to say, when we did this, when I did this, this is there. And they're sharing from experience, and that's a mentoring role. Sometimes a manager is also in training. So training, when you look at it, if you go to a training course has very specific outcomes. And we are then going to literally have a tick process to say, yes, we've covered that content so that you can actually have that particular training. And there are times that a manager is actually got a training hat on, and they're showing them, for example, what skills they need, what are the steps they need, what is the checklist they need, so that they can also complete that. The third thing that they're often doing is facilitating. So one of the things that they're doing is facilitating a conversation. They're asking whether, for example, when you're running a meeting, when you're running a discussion, or even a brainstorming session, the idea is, as a facilitator, you're making sure that everybody's voice is heard. You are dealing with any conflicts as you go to, and then you're working out how we can get our team working more effectively and efficiently. And you notice that I have not used the word manager. And is the fourth area managing? No. The fourth area is coaching. That's why this chapter in getting your people to step up in my latest book is called Managers as Coaches. So if we can actually have them coaching, which is what we want them to do, we want them to teach their people how to fish. We want them to become self-sufficient. We want them to start working on their solutions themselves. So what we want to be doing is we want to be able to do the coaching, ask them great questions, which helps them get to that particular answer. Now, what do we do once we've actually looked at those 4 roles? Well, one of the things we want to do is we want to have a consistent model that your business, as a business leader or a business owner, can use in your business. Now, there are many, many great models. And in the book, one of the things I speak about is that when you use a single model, everybody's on the same page. Everybody gets that particular model in terms of what needs to happen. The model that I talk about that I absolutely love, and the reason I love it is that it's simple. I love what it stands for. I love how long it's been around. And I love the fact that you can use it in any given situation. And this is a model called the GROW model. And the GROW stands for an acronym. G is for goal, R is for reality, O is for options, and W is for will. Now, you can obviously read the chapter, you can find this model online, but let me take you through the overview of it. The goal is, what do we want to be at the end of this particular coaching session, if we don't call it that, the end of the meeting? The reality is, where is the reality? Where are we now? So we then start to identify, where are we now, where the gap is in terms of where we want to go. And then we go, okay, the O is for options. So we then start to generate some ideas that are going to help us achieve our goal and close that gap further. And the will is for willingness or attitude, like how committed are we to doing that? For example, we go, yes, there are our options and this is our best option forward. Okay, but we've got 12 other people involved in that. How committed are we in getting these 12 people on board, and how are we going to engage them? What are we going to particularly do? So important. I first came across this particular model in The Tao of Coaching by Max Lensberg. Absolutely fantastic coaching book and a really, really great model. And so I love the GROW model, as I said, because I just found it simple and it empowers people. It helps them do some problem solving, and it is, really, really that simple. So one of the things is really knowing how does that look like in terms of when we use the GROW model. So I just want to use a very simple example in this podcast. I want to use the idea of coaching my daughter in terms of working out whether she actually applies for a particular course at her school or not. So she said, I'm really confused. I don't know what to do. Okay, and I didn't say we're going to go through the GROW model, as you don't as a really great manager when you're coaching. It's okay, well, let's just get to the basics. Let's talk about what the goal is. Well, for her, the goal was to make a decision on whether to choose option A for a subject or option B for a subject. Great, super clear. What's the reality? What's the R in the GROW model? Well, the reality is I've got to make a decision in the next 10 days. And the reality is there's some pros and cons on option A, and there are some pros and cons of option B. Great. Well, let's look at each of those options in detail. Sometimes you don't even have those options clear. Sometimes you might have to brainstorm 5 options and then evaluate them. But in this case, for her, there were 2 very, very distinctive paths. So what we did was we looked at both the options and we looked at, well, what's the short-term benefit, medium-term benefit? Short-term is the next 12 months. Okay, well, this course is a bit easier, so that's the benefit of that particular course. What is the benefit of that medium term? Well, if I do that particular subject, then I'm actually going to get a little bit better involvement and options and opportunities if I decide to go down the university path. And that will also lead me in the long term, in terms of 5, 7+ years, it's going to really help me get to a particular path of what it is that I need to do for my career. So evaluating things when you do short term, she's often going to then, as we all do as humans, pick the least path. But by evaluating those options, short, long term, in this case, really helped. Sometimes if you don't have any options in this case, you would brainstorm some of the options and look at the pros and cons. And then I talked to her about the willingness and the attitude. And I said, look, what is your willingness to commit to this slightly harder course and doing that? She said, well, before I commit, I think I just want to go and meet my teacher and have a conversation with them. Absolutely great. So the action that came out of that was for her to do that. And we then followed that up another few days later, and then she decided to do that course. So that's a very simple example of using the GROW model. And one of the things that I do in the book is I have a lot of actual real role plays so that you can see how to apply the GROW model and how simple it is. And also a couple of examples of companies where they've actually looked that into. So now let's cover some of the reflections or actions that you might be able to take. So one of the things that I'd love for you to think about is what are the specific training needs that you've identified for some of your managers to become coaches. So let's look at, they might say, I'm really good at performance, I'm really good at career, but I'm not so good in leadership. So having a very simple map of what are they really, really good at in terms of coaching, what are they not good at? It's almost like we're using the GROW model to work out where they need to grow as coaches as well. We also need to have a time allocation. So I'd get an idea of what percentage of their time are they spending between coaching and training and facilitating and mentoring. Now, if they're spending a lot of their time on training, you go, okay, how do we get that changed? And if the managers repeating themselves over and over and over again with their team, that means that the team are not taking the training on seriously. And really what they're using the manager for is training and not coaching. So getting an idea what percentages there are and setting a goal, like say, for example, you're only coaching for 20%. Well, how do we move that to 30 or 40 or 50% in the future? Also, what are some of the actions that they're going to take? How do we make sure that that manager is coach, if they've got some issues, they can run it by you with a business leader or trainer? Do we need to send them to anything external, or can they just start to practice things like using the GROW model? The other thing that's really important is that are the people that they're coaching, the coachees or the people that report to that manager, coachable? It's really important that they're open, and I talk about this in one of the chapters where I talk about Shoshin and having an open mindset, having a positive and open mindset. I know that when we look at Carol Dweck and all the work that she's done around having an open mind and a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, very important to actually have people in your business that are also going to be able to foster that open mindset. And also one of the things I say to managers and leaders all the time, spend more time with your high performers. Yeah, but they don't need it as much. Yes, but make them feel loved. Give them the GROW model. Ask them what support they need because they're your high performers in your business. Then go to your medium performers and then do the low performers last. Sometimes as business leaders and owners, the people that take up all our energy are the low performers. And we really want to turn this thinking, this action on its head. I hope you've got 1 or 2 key actions out of this podcast and how to make your managers as coaches and really shift that. If you'd like to find out about our training programs that we do in this particular areas, please shout out. In the meantime, keep growing your people, keep encouraging your managers to be coaches, and make sure you retain your fantastic key talent. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.